the Write Out Project in 2019. And my name is Kevin Hodgson. I am part of the Western Massachusetts Writing Project as a co-director of outreach. And I'm also a sixth grade teacher as well in Western Massachusetts. And I'm going to be kind of guiding some of the discussion tonight for this first video chat that we're having as we celebrate the first week of Write Out for 2019. And if you're not sure what Write Out is, it's a 2-week free connected kind of learning project in which we're making connections between writing and place-based learning, national parks, city blocks, rural gardens, you name it. And we're hoping that the places will inspire stories for the different places that you're exploring and thinking about. And, you know, we're aiming to help connect teachers and stewards of public spaces and writers and students as well in thinking about the ways that we can make connections in a lot of different ways, with different media. So not just writing, but with photography and video and a lot of kind of open areas for how you and students and park rangers and others can kind of create experiences and going to be thinking about stories of place. The theme for this week is discovering stories. And as we stretch into next week, we're going to be kind of moving right through the National Day on Writing. And we'll talk about that maybe a little bit later as a way to kind of celebrate writing across the country, maybe in the places around you. And tonight we have a whole bunch of people that are joining us, which we're really kind of happy about. And we also have our guest, Kathryn Steyr, who wrote this great book called If I Were a Park Ranger that we're going to talk about in a little bit. And she's agreed to come on and answer some questions about her book and about national parks and stories and other things like that. But we do also want to open it up to other people to kind of talk about some of the projects that they've been doing is connected to Write Out and connected to classrooms or whatever it is they happen to kind of be doing. So what I thought I would do is if anybody is interested in sharing, if they could use a chat room, just say, you know, I have something I'd like to share. But I do know that I'm going to call on Kristen first because, you know, she raised her hand way before the video even began. To maybe talk about what went on last weekend at Weir Farm, but also part of the bigger project. And I see Rich is here too, so maybe you could give us a little overview.
Awesome, thanks Kevin. Hi everybody, my name's Kristen Lassard. I'm the lead park ranger at Weir Farm National Historic Site in Connecticut. And I've had the pleasure of working with Rich Novak and Brian Crandall from the Connecticut Writing Project in Fairfield for the last few years. Putting on teacher workshops at Weir Farm National Historic Site through this exciting partnership between national parks and National Writing Project sites. So we've had a really great couple of years, and this year we scheduled our teacher workshop to coincide with Write Out, which happens to also coincide with the National Day on Writing. So it's all really coming together this week, which is awesome. We had a group of teachers at Weir Farm this past Saturday for day one of a 3-day workshop to start planning and being inspired and learning together. And then we're going to continue the workshop on the National Day on Writing, where we're also having a public event at the park. So anybody can come and write out, make a little journal, and go out and write, and then we'll do some sharing. And the teachers will also be planning an activity for students that will come for the 3rd day of the teacher workshop on Monday. So Rich has really been spearheading this effort on behalf of the Connecticut Writing Project, along with Brian. And it was really awesome. The teachers were super inspirational, and they had great ideas of what we could be doing with students and what they could be doing on the National Day on Writing too. So I don't know, Rich, if you wanted to add anything from our first day. It was great. I thought it was really fun.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Kristen. Yeah, I mean, I get to work with Kristen our 3rd year in a row together, and you know, as collaborators, I think we're really starting to click. It's really cool. So this year we're doing a lot of the same kind of content, place-based content, talking about eco-criticism, a little of that stuff. We introduced that on the Saturday, the first Saturday. But I think what's really exciting this year is the fact that we're going to have students. I'm really excited to have, and I give Brian Crandall a lot of credit for that because he came up with this idea, let's bring in some students. So 2 of our participants, one a past participant, each are going to bring a class on that Monday. And the goal is to have these teachers kind of be inspired by the place, be inspired by this national park, be inspired by the paintings, the art that's there, be inspired by their own creations, be inspired by the theory that they're encountering, to come up with some new activities for these students on Monday. So, and they're going to get to try it out. That's really cool, and that's new, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what we come up with. It's kind of like one of those things too. I don't exactly know what we're going to be doing next week, right? And that kind of excites me a little bit too. So there's definitely a little bit of serendipity this year that I appreciate.
Great, thanks, Rich, and thanks, Kristen. Anybody else want to jump in and kind of share what they've been up to? Kim, you want to talk about what you've been doing in your classroom this week with the maps and poems and writing?
Sure. I guess I'm trying to think about how to frame what I've been doing.
You want to introduce yourself first? So
Sure, that maybe that would help. I'm Kim Lard. I'm the director of the San Diego Area Writing Project, and I'm also a third grade teacher here in San Diego. And as a writing project, we've been talking about Write Out and how we could include teachers in classrooms all over our county. And then because I'm a classroom teacher, I'm thinking, how am I going to make this happen in my place? And so I actually, because everything takes longer in a classroom than you anticipate, we started at the beginning of October thinking about place. And I was working with my third graders about places they love. And we're a place that likes the outdoors. So that part of it was pretty easy for my students. We don't have a lot of national parks nearby. So we thought we'll just take advantage of the places that kids like and enjoy. So I started by reading some picture books to my kids. All the Places You Love by Patricia McLaughlin and Where Are You From by Mendez is the last name. And my students then started brainstorming all the places. They couldn't wait to talk and share about the places they loved. And we read a poem called City I Love and used that as a mentor text. And my students started writing about not only the places they love, but the things they like to do in the places that they love. And they drew, I had them draw maps of themselves in a very sort of open-ended way. I wanted them to think about maps and think about the places that they loved and somehow incorporate themselves into them. And I posted a few on my blog last night, but their creations are absolutely delightful. I had a student make a pineapple map that includes all the places that she loves. Another one has this creature, I don't think it comes from, maybe comes from anime, from graphic novels he reads, and created this map of that includes Morro Bay, which is one of the places he loves, which isn't right here in San Diego, but is a fabulous place to visit. And they're writing like crazy. Today, they were writing about inanimate objects, which was super fun. And they videotaped themselves. They used Spark Video and made movies of their poems, which hopefully you guys will get to see a little later. I plan to send a few out into the Twitter universe and see what happens. We've been working on this idea of let's amplify what they have to say and see if anyone responds. And they've been super excited about that idea as well. So we've been busy writers here in our third grade world.
That's great, yeah. And the work you've been sharing has been really exciting to see. So that'll be really fun to see the next stage of it. Maybe Steve, if you don't mind jumping in, because Kim was talking about the idea of place, and you've been doing a project around mapping and family history. And I wonder if you wouldn't mind talking about what you've been up to.
Sure. So this is a project that I started earlier before Write Out, but it seems to fit well with Write Out. We started our year with the basic question, which was, what is my story? And And we expanded that to include family stories as well. I got an idea from seeing Kevin's some work that he had done with the armory, I believe it was, in your town, using Google My Maps as a place to collect stories digitally. And so I thought, well, I wonder if we could collect our stories in the classroom that way too. So I shared out maps to kids, and then I created my own map that situated some of the stories that were really important to me from my family as kind of a mentor text, because I didn't really have one. I just had to create my own, which was a lot of fun for me to do. And then the kids then talked to their families and found out stories about, it wasn't supposed to be like a genealogy, but it was more of a, like, what are some stories that are really important to you, and where did they happen? And so then they situated those stories. They told the stories in the context of Google My Maps and added in photographs, and in some cases a few interviews with family members that they could put in there as well. So that was really cool. And then I asked them to reflect afterwards what they had learned in the process. Like what did they learn? What stories did they not know? And some that were like, I didn't know about this medal that my grandfather had been awarded, at the Pentagon. She just didn't know about it. And then another one, some smaller stories, which were really, I thought, really poignant. One boy was able to like pinpoint the exact place on a creek where his grandfather had caught a large pike that was part of the family's story. This was a northern pike. And so it was like, it just blew him away that he could like imagine where his grandfather was when he was his age. So I was just really pleased with the way actually taking a place and stories and combining them really kind of worked together. Some kids reported that as they were looking at a map with their parents, it brought out other stories that and the parents reported that too, that they hadn't anticipated that these stories would come out. And I think there's something kind of magical about placing yourself within a map, and then it becomes evocative in that way, and stories appear that you didn't even know were there. So
yeah, it's perfect. Great. Thank you, Steve. Awesome. Amber, do you want to share what you've been up to in your park site?
Absolutely. So Homestead National Monument of America just had its collaboration with the Nebraska Writing Project, the Prairie Festival Workshop, and I collaborated with the teachers starting last year to create a lesson plan based on using primary documents and our authentic schoolhouse that was built in 1872 by the community in which our park is in. And we used the school and the primary documents, which were letters, photos from the school, to lay the foundation of place and the stories that took place there. And then Brenda then took the lead on having the kids learn about how to write historical fiction by using a real setting. And we had them write out that way. They went to various locations around the park in a marathon style, and experienced a workshop on a different form of writing at each place, and then had the experience to write. So it was very neat.
That's great. Sounds exciting. I know you have plans for next week too that we'll talk about probably next week a little more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Susan, do you want to talk about your floating idea for, I know it's not right there and right out, but it's connected in a way.
It is. We're going to be working right now. We have like 6 schools that are signed up for next September. We just started this about a month ago, so we need a little time to make sure we're doing it. But we're going to be floating kids down a river. We're in a wild and scenic river, and so it's very unique and very beautiful. And the kids, local kids, don't really understand how important it is, and so we're going to be using the sense of place and getting them actually canoeing. So the kids will canoe. We'll have a guide with each group, 1 to 15 to 20 kids ratio, and then we have sweeps that will be canoeing with them. Beginning and the end of each group, they have a staggered start. We actually have to take part of our teaching teams by canoe out to their locations because they can't get there any other way. And then they'll learn about the different things, whether it's geology, whether it's hydrology, wide range of different things that we can talk about. We're still picking those out. But anyway, the idea is that they learn about a different type of writing style at each of these locations while they're interacting with something unique about the river, all ending up, all leading up to pulling out at a 60. Sorry, my husband just, call him, Phil, please. Yeah, the dog won't get out of here. I even went to the bedroom just to stay out of that. But anyway, they'll all pull out where a 63-foot waterfall is. And so then they can use that part also. So there's waterfalls all along this path, and it's going to be pretty cool. Totally different. So we're making sure we're getting all of our T's crossed, I dotted as far as safety, and then making sure we have the kids, everything we want with the teaching figured out. So the Nebraska Writing Project is also quite excited to join us. In fact, Jan Nispel is starting with the planning with us, and what we see right now is that we can't do it in one day because she has so many teachers.
I think Susan cut out. I'm sorry, Susan, I'm going to move on, but you're frozen right now, I think.
Excited in getting them just using the school as a place to go write from.
Great. Sounds really exciting, and I look forward to kind of hearing more about that later on.
Okay.
Yeah, Andrea, do you want to talk about what you're kind of thinking of doing around writing parties?
Oh, well, I just call them writing parties, but I just feel like I want to always invite people to my big ideas. So for a couple different things we have going on. So this week is our Michigan Council of Teachers of English big conference. And so we tied it to the National Day on Writing. And the theme is reimagining the joyful journey. And so what we're doing is we created a map and a map with a compass rose on it and stuff. And so we are using that invitation to write into the day at the conference on Friday. So that's a top secret thing. No one knows. It's supposed to be a surprise, so don't tell, okay?
Oh.
Right. The other thing that we're doing is that it's the 100-year anniversary of the women's right to vote, so women's suffrage. So we're celebrating that in Oakland County, Michigan, which is the county that I work for. And right now we have, our website is not totally finished because we're waiting on a few last minute things, but taking the idea of the history of the place of Oakland County, we are pulling together some primary source documentation to inspire writers to either create PSAs, public service announcements, or poetry. And we're using suffragette poetry to be those primary sources to inspire the students. And then we're launching in the spring a big event where we'll be screening those PSAs and the poems. So we've been running around getting venues and sponsors and all kinds of things. So we're pulling together all those ideas, and I was really taken by the Write Out invitation to think about the histories of your place and whose history is not being lifted up in the place where you live. And so I was kind of connecting those two ideas. So today I was like digging into LGBTQ history in my area and women's history, and it's like pulling things out for us to use as inspiration for our particular place. So that's what I'm working on right now. But my favorite part about the 100 years is the kids, we also had a sticker contest. So the winning sticker design gets to be the I voted sticker in our primary in March. So we're very, very excited about that too. So that's what's going on around here.
Yeah, it sounds exciting. Cool, thank you. Sarah joined us. Hi, Sarah. Do you want to talk about what you did over the weekend in New Jersey?
Yeah, so
you should introduce yourself, Sarah.
There we go. I'm Sarah Gross from New Jersey, and I am part of the New Jersey Council of Teachers of English Faculty Board, and we wanted to do something for the National Day on Writing, and then I wanted to do something on Write Out too, because my master's degree is in biology, but I teach English. So we are actually in New Jersey here, home to the Pine Barrens, which is the Pine Barrens National Reserve. It's part of the park system, but a lot of people don't realize that, and they don't realize how large it is and just what a huge role it's played in the history of New Jersey, both, you know, in terms of ecology and economics and people and places and so many things. So we held our own Write Out event for teachers, and we met up at the Forest Resource Education Center, which is in Jackson, New Jersey. And they are the home of New Jersey's, the State Forestry Nursery, and then a lot of trails and a lot of educational trails dedicated to the Pine Barrens. So we spent 2 hours walking around and just being outside on a beautiful day and stopping in a variety of different habitats and just writing, while also discussing different ways that we could get our students outside and doing similar things, whether it's this week and next week for Write Out, or hopefully year round, because we tend to stay inside, and it's, you know, even just getting outside for a few minutes is so important and beneficial for our kids of all ages and us.
Great, thanks. And you all shared some great pictures from that event too, so
Yeah.
it was really cool.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Before I get to Kathryn and her book, does anybody else I didn't get to want to share anything? I don't want to miss anybody. If you wave at me, I will pass the mic. All right. I guess nobody's waving at me. Hi, everyone. All right, so we have a special guest tonight, Kathryn Steyr. Is that right, Kathryn? Okay. Who's written this really? Yeah, Kristen has too. Really great book called If I Were a Park Ranger. And so we wanted to invite Kathryn on because it connects to the partnership of the National Writing Project and the National Park Service. Well, not directly connects, but connects to the Park Service. And we thought it'd be kind of fun to talk to her about how she went about writing her book, and also how she became a writer too, since part of what we're trying to do is inspire our students to become writers in different ways too. So Kathryn, thank you so much for joining us tonight on this chat.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you great. You want to?
So many lucky students out there. My, what inspiring programs. I wish that I had some of those kind of programs when I was in school. And I also wanted to say hi to Andrea. I'm a Michigan native, and I attended Oakland University. That's where my undergrad is from. So
Yay, that's right in my backyard.
yeah, so, and I live in San Antonio, Texas right now. I went through the San Antonio Writing Project program at the University of Texas at San Antonio in, I think it was 2011. So I also have been through the program. So I'm really glad to be here, really excited.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little about where the idea for the book came from?
Sure. I like to say the book was 17 years in the making. My first book came out, it was called If I Were President, and I was going to follow it up with If I Were a Park Ranger. And although it was about being a park ranger, I really saw it as a way to showcase some of our different national parks. And I think we all know how important it is to connect kids to outdoor spaces and to our national parks. There are future teachers, parents, voters, leaders. And so I think we need to foster some of those positive experiences in our national parks. So that was one of the reasons. But I started writing the book right after my first book came out, which is If I Were President, which has been out for 20 years. But when I wrote it, researched it, and turned it in, I did not find an editor who was interested. So I still loved the book. I put it aside and I kept thinking about it. And in that time, I visited many more national parks. And finally, after several years had passed, I thought, you know what, I'm going to try to see if there's an interest in that book again, because times have changed. I think that we are understanding the importance of connecting children to nature. We are understanding the importance of our national parks and preserving them. And so when I pitched it this time, the editor was very excited. And so that's how it came to be, that book.
That's great. How did you get into writing? So your first book was the President book. How did that happen? What's your writing path?
Well, I did study communications at Oakland University, and when I graduated, I worked in a nonprofit in downtown Detroit that promoted Detroit for business. And I got married, and my husband got a job where he was going to be a consultant and traveling all over the community, because I always wanted to travel, but I couldn't have a traditional career path. So I started to, while we were traveling, write and submit. Some of it was travel articles, some of it was children's stories, and they started to be accepted. And then when we stopped traveling, I found myself in a position as in a YMCA preschool program, and President's Day came up, and I could not find a book for the 4-year-olds that would work for President's Day. And as I talked to them, of course, they didn't know what a president was or what a president did. They didn't know the president lived in the White House. So I could see that there was a need for a general book like that, but we tried to have fun with it. So I wrote about 6 children imagining themselves as president, the fun things as well as the serious things. And as I said, that book has been out 20 years now, and it's still in print, and it's still popular during President's Day and every election year. So that was my first book. And I have, I believe it's 10 books out now. And when A Kid Like Me Fights Cancer was number 9, I believe. I mean, sorry, that's my last one. My last one, If I Were a Park Ranger, was number 9.
Right. I think I counted about 24 parks kind of referenced in the book. Have you been to all those parks, or is that part of just the illustrator, connection, publisher? I was just curious.
Well, I did want to showcase a lot of national parks, and I wanted to showcase the variety of them. So it was a collaboration between the illustrator, the editor, and myself, trying to see, think about which parks we could cover in each illustration. My goal is to, yes, be to every national park, but I have not been to everyone in the book yet, but working on it.
Were there any kind of interesting stories that kind of came to light when you were kind of doing some of your research or thinking about the
Yes,
books?
there were 3 things that I learned during my research. And the first one was one of the park rangers that I interviewed several park rangers, told me that our national parks are living outdoor laboratories. And she talked about how there's scientific studies on the magma at Yellowstone, right? And then also that Dr. Shaver at Padre Island National Seashore here in Texas has done lots of research. She's a park ranger and a scientist, and has done a lot of research with the endangered turtle species. And basically that almost every national park has these scientific experiments going on. So that was really interesting to me. The second thing is that how much our national parks are repositories of all of these primary sources. I was working on a book, it's still under wraps, but I had the opportunity to go to the Grand Canyon, I think it's called the museum, the research library. I have to look up the exact name of it, but I had the chance to do some research there, and it put on the white gloves. They brought out the primary sources, and I was able to look through those. And so there's so much information about that. And I think I was going to look too, when I was working on this last year, I was listening to the Write Out radio program, and Kristen Cantrell, I believe, was talking about the projects going on at, let's see, it was the Valley Forge National Historical Park, that's right, and about how the kids were looking into the stories of the African American soldiers who fought in the Revolutionary War. And so that actually ended up being part of the author's notes. And then the third thing that came up when I was interviewing one of the park rangers, I just thought it was really interesting. She talked about how she worked at the Great Smoky Mountains, and it was part of her job to open up the area of Cades Cove. And she said how every morning when she went out, it was a little different. Maybe the fog or the mist was different. Maybe the moisture was different. And today there were little beads of dew on the spider webs. I imagine the bird song was different. The colors in the Smoky Mountains, of course, are beautiful and change during the year. And I just thought that was such an interesting perspective, that for her, every day on the job was different, because when you went out there, nature had changed the picture, changed the story every day. So those were the three of the things that I found very interesting as I was researching the book.
And I think you capture that kind of beauty towards the end of your book too, as some of the final pages in there about just recognizing how beautiful things can be.
Yeah.
Actually, Kristen, I'm wondering, because I'm sure have read the book, right? What was your view on the book? Because it's all about being a park ranger, and you and others on here are.
Did we get it right?
I don't know, it's great. Like, people don't always know exactly what a park ranger does. There's this idea that we're just out whistling in the woods and we're just outside all the time. And, a lot of people don't know, like Kathryn was saying, there's all these different types of national parks out there. And there's just this like great diversity from, those big grand natural wonders like the Grand Canyon, things that people think about when they hear national park, to like these little historic sites, to the scenic rivers. And I just thought it was really cool that diversity was represented. And Weir Farm made it in the book, which also made me very excited. It's a national park for the arts. And so just like showing that diversity of what it is and some of the things that park rangers do, I thought it was really cool. And I think, the kids and the adults that read it are going to want to be a park ranger after they read it. So it was great. Yeah.
Can I just chime in to say how excited Kristen was about this book? I have to, because, she, as soon as I got there, as soon as I got there on Saturday, she was like, "Oh my God, you have to see this book. This is a writing project person." And I was like, "Okay, this is great." And so I didn't get a chance to read it. I'm going to, for sure. And I'm really excited actually to share it with my 7-year-old. And she's like a big, my 5-year-old too. They're both big outdoor lovers. I'm lucky I didn't pressure them in the wrong way. That's something to consider with our students. I always try to think about not pressuring them to get into this kind of stuff, really letting them approach it. So they are outdoor lovers, and I can't wait to show them the book, because it is a beautiful book. I haven't read it, but the illustrations are gorgeous.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool too that you actually go to the park. So I actually met Kathryn last year during Ride Out at Weir Farm. She came there with her family, and I gave her a little notebook and went out and did some writing. And I thought that was really, really cool that you actually, go to the sites. And so it was really, well researched and well thought out. So great. Yeah, it was awesome. So proves 2 thumbs up.
Thank you. And that was a really special day. And your hospitality, I was just blown away by that. So thank you. That was wonderful.
I guess I didn't mention how our writing project site is connected to the Springfield Armory Historic Site, which is right in Springfield, Massachusetts. And, one of the things that we often grapple with in Write Out is how to make sure that urban historic spaces are represented, because, I think our view of national parks often encompasses Grand Canyon and the Yellowstone, the kind of big parks that, fuel our imagination. We're trying to invite people to make sure they notice all the other spaces too, in those historic places like Philly and for us at Springfield. When we run summer camps for middle school students at the Armory, which we do, and invite families from Springfield, most of those families have never been to the Armory, and it's right in the heart of the downtown. And so trying to raise the profile, I think, of urban sites is as much important as cherishing the kind of big open spaces too. I don't know if you ran into that at all when you're doing any research with your book or anything, Kathryn, but just something I know that we've talked about a lot in Write Out.
Well, we did try to make sure that we, as we talked about, include a variety of different spaces. A lot of people don't realize that the Statue of Liberty is part of the National Park Service right there in New York, right? So we tried to cover different kinds of national seashores are part of the national park system. The battlefields are part of the national parks system. So, and we tried to represent a variety of that.
Yeah, and that comes through the book as well. So in thinking of trying to capture the idea of the national park system and park rangers, how do you think we can best reach teachers to try to kind of reach out to those public spaces? Any ideas for, I mean, obviously books like yours are a nice inroad to kind of bring that into the classroom and think about it. Have you thought any ideas about how we might help make connections between educators like some of us are and park rangers like some of us are, but also other stewards of public space?
Well, I am part of the Texas Master Naturalist program here in Texas, and they train volunteers to work at our parks in different capacities. And one of them is several people have learned or are very good at taking kids on walks through the natural areas that we have, pointing out the flora and the fauna. And schools are invited to bring their students out to the parks. And I don't know that all the schools in our area realize that this opportunity is available to them. So I would encourage teachers to see what programs are available at the parks that, you know, if transportation can be an issue sometimes, but if they can bring their students to these areas, sometimes there are programs in place that you can take advantage of. And other than that, I am so impressed with the programs that have been discussed here today when they're using the primary sources that are in the museums or the libraries at these different parks. I think that's a wonderful way to make that connection and show that these parks, you know, I think a lot of people think of the parks as pretty scenery. And that's why I think I was so impressed to learn about all these primary sources that are kept there, all the research that's going on there. So I think the more that we can illuminate that for our students, the better that is.
Yeah, one of the things we do at the Armory is bring out all those primary sources to uncover those kind of stories of immigrant workers and women in the workplace during World War II and kind of bring those stories. So that's really important. I did mean to go to Vicki as well, if she's willing to talk about her work in Baltimore as part of this idea of parks and cities. Vicki, you want to talk a little about, introduce yourself and talk about what you've been working on?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Vicki McQuitty. I'm the director of Maryland Writing Project, and we have the pleasure of working with two parks. One is Fort McHenry, which is, I mean, it's right in the city. One minute you're walking down an urban street and the next minute you're at the park gates. And it's really interesting to explore a park that's in the city. Well, I guess it kind of is in the middle of the city. It's on the edge of the water, but it's really interesting because I feel like it's almost like stories hide there, and you realize that just how the city is so integral to the history and the park and sort of that symbiotic relationship, and how, you know, historically that the park was there as the city grew up, and the city and the fort, the history is all wrapped up together in ways that I find kind of surprising or that I didn't expect, because you do tend to think of national parks as being, you know, like, you know, outdoor spaces that are more scenic. And it's not scenic. It's historical and tied up with everything else that has happened in the history of the city. So I do think it provides a really unique experience. The other park we work with is Hamden National Historic Site, which is actually in Towson, Maryland, which is just right outside of Baltimore. And it's amazing. It's down a street that feels like a little country road, and suddenly there's the park. And it's amazing how many people don't even know that park is there. People who've lived in this area for their entire lives are like, what? There's a national park there? And it's amazing. The history of that park is so powerful. It has a very long history, and there's you can learn about pretty much any period of American history from basically pre-revolution up until the 1950s. It's all represented at that park, and people don't even know it's there. So it's interesting how stories and even the parks themselves can hide whenever they're in an urban area.
Yeah, we've definitely noticed that. Do you want to talk about NCTE coming up and the connection with Fort McHenry and what you're hoping to do there?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are going to have a writing marathon on the Saturday of NCTE at Fort McHenry, led by one of the park rangers. And so we're going to have the opportunity to hear from the park ranger about the hidden stories at Fort McHenry, and then have opportunity to let that get our own thinking going, and then to be able to write in response to that. So anyone who's here for NCTE, please come and join us. National Writing Project will be pushing out information about it, and it's also on our Maryland Writing Project website. So hopefully a lot of people will be able to come, because it's going to be really fun.
That's great. And Bethany, are you and Rich doing a session there, or am I? I'm not sure.
Rich, Andrea, and I are all doing a session.
And Andrea,
we all like to throw parties, and so we're doing a session and throwing a writing party.
I'm excited about the party. That's what I know.
We're gonna make everybody write. That's the whole thing. We're just gonna say, forget NCTE. Everyone in the hallway. Here we go.
That's right. We're knocking down walls.
Knocking down walls.
As many walls as we can.
I don't know.
Right
It'd be crazy.
Well, Bethany, so you were in the chat room talking a little bit about a project around, I'm sorry, I scrolled past me now.
Oh,
archaeologists, and you want to just talk about what you were writing about in there?
Yeah, so Project Write is a 2-week summer writing camp at Independence Park, which is a national historical park. I mean, well, most people know about it because Liberty Belt, but it's in Philadelphia, and it's like right in the city. And not too long ago, they discovered that the first President's House site was like, right there next to Market Street, which is one of the busiest streets in the city. And the archaeologist who worked on we were exploring the President's House site and controversies around establishing the site and what would go into the exhibit. And one of the ways that we looked at it, we had the archaeologist who did the dig come in and talk about all the complications about how do you do a dig in a city that's big, and people are walking by all the time and shouting down at you, and it's completely public, everything that they did. It was pretty amazing. And then we wrote about it.
Of course. Well, Chris, do you want to jump in at all? Because you have a kind of view of the whole kind of Northeast region. Maybe you should introduce yourself and some of the things you're seeing happening with Write Out and other connections with the writing project too.
Sure. So, hey everyone, I'm Chris Constantine. I work with the National Park Service, and I'm on the team that is helping to kind of support you all in your learning over these next 2 weeks. So really excited to be here and hear the conversation and the connections that everybody's making. And I had just shared in the chat like something that I was doing, which was kind of thinking about our theme of discovering stories. And I have a little bit of a different perspective, I guess, of Write Out, because I'm really looking to learn from teachers, and like that's the story that I'm always interested to discover, because it's a perspective that like I don't have professional experience in. And I think that there's just so much to learn from teachers. But yesterday was actually a federal holiday for us is Columbus Day / Indigenous Peoples Day. So I was spending some time kind of thinking about the connections between Write Out and discovering stories and untold stories. And especially living on the East Coast, the Native story can not always be really visible, even though we're all on everywhere we live on land that was once usually went by another name. And so there's a national monument that was established in 2016, and it's in the foothills of Mount Katahdin in Maine, which is the ancestral land of the Wabanaki people. And so this is new history to me. I didn't learn about this growing up in our history books, and because it's a newer national park, we don't have a ton of information about it. We're still doing some of that research to really understand what are all the different histories that we are now stewards of and that we need to help surface and uncover. So I was spending some time yesterday doing some discovering of my own, and there's a a documentary called Dawnland that talks about like the role that the government has played in really doing some major injustices to the Wabanaki people. And so I was learning about that yesterday, and really just kind of like noticing and trying to build empathy for what that must be like for an individual in a home and a culture. And honestly, just reflecting a little bit about like the role that I play as somebody that I play and that we play as working for the federal government, like the role that we and the legacy that we are part of as part of that, which isn't always the most uplifting things to talk about. I think it's and to think about and reflect on, and I think it's there is much to celebrate, but there's also like some critical thinking that we can do in this area of place-based and like what we know about our histories and the histories we tell and the histories we share with others. And I know that on the planning team, we've been kind of talking about some of that too, like how can we support folks in thinking critically about place? So, and I've seen some of that happening already. I think it was actually some of the Pine Barrens content that you all were sharing was starting to uncover some of that too. And I was just drawn to the Pine Barrens work that you were doing over the weekend because I was there over the weekend. So yeah, I've just been really taking this time in these first few days of Write Out to like do that work of noticing and discovering myself from the teacher perspective, and then the stories that we the stories that are still untold and maybe a little unknown to even those that work in the organization every day.
Great, thanks, Chris. That transitions nice to some of the work that Amber has been doing around gathering resources to help us and others kind of think about those stories. I don't know if you want to talk about some of the work you're doing around curating some of that, Amber, for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So this push towards primary documents in the classroom has been amazing. Sam Weinberg and Stanford University have really worked on developing, a model for analytical thinking and analytical-based history. And I have always appreciated that, but being part of Write Out has really made me appreciate how we can ground those documents that are now available in so many different places to place, to truly understand these places better, the conditions and what made, had them be preserved, because all national parks and even, public places were identified to be preserved. But the stories that are undiscovered are often, there's so many amazing stories that weren't part of that initial plan of preservation. And so really thinking about not only the stories of the past, but how they can influence the stories of the future. And so I've just connected some various primary documents that are databases that I think does a really good job of having diversity of, so the Avalon Project from Yale is huge and has a wide variety of different topics. And then PBS does a great job. So I have PBS's Africans in America resources, but their various documentaries are often accompanied by different lesson plan ideas as well as primary documents. So while that's the one that is featured, there is a lot of different resources. Most universities, sometimes it is theme-based on a topic that that university is known for, but they also will have primary documents. And I think that documenting the American South is really important as well, since a lot of that, from the time of Reconstruction, a lot of that history has been glossed over. And so bringing those documents to light to better understand those places.
It's great. Thank you, Amber. And a lot of those, almost all those resources are linked right off our Write Out website. As part of the resource documents that you and the other members of the team have been collecting, which is great. I did want to invite Dorothy if she wanted to share some of the work or her insights or thinking about some of the work that her writing project does with the Roosevelt property. And you can take it any way you want, Dorothy.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, my head is spinning a little bit because I've got 3 different things swarming around. So just to backtrack a little bit and talk about these writers hikes that we've been doing just seasonally that are really powerful at the Roosevelt and Vanderbilt historic sites, and we kind of align them with the seasons. And we also have an artist working with us, and that's been really great because people come and paint or do an art project right on site, and that's really inspiring. And then the other piece, just kind of connecting to what Vicki was saying, and sort of an inquiry that I'm really interested in, is that kind of crossover between community and the National Park Service. So the Hyde Park National Park's locations are like right embedded in the village of Hyde Park, which is a very small historic village, and there's a very active historical site and a very active sort of train station community, and then and then the Episcopal Church is also really active, and they're all kind of tangentially working on this gathering of primary sources. So it's interesting to kind of connect those spaces, and I guess my inquiry is how to get those spaces to talk a little bit more about what they're discovering. And I'm really excited because on Friday, I wrote it in the chat, but I'm going to be attending this graveyard tour where there are performers who perform monologues of people that were buried right in the St. James Episcopal Church, and some of them are Roosevelt relatives. Some of them, there's one of a slave who worked for the church, and the Bard family that was a very active property owner and property builder in the area. So it's just interesting work that's being done, and I'm trying to figure out how to tie all those pieces together because it's a lot.
Great, that all sounds really interesting. So Kathryn, I'm going to come back to you a little bit because I know in our email discussions, you're talking about some of the work you're doing right now around working with kids around nature writing. You want to talk about what you've been working with?
Sure. So as part of the Texas Master Naturalist, I've been working in informal education with nature and children. And I approached the education coordinator for our natural areas here in San Antonio about trying a new program, and we're going to try it out Saturday. And it's called a nature picture book picnic, and we're inviting the kids to bring snacks. They come with a parent, and we're going to start off with reading some nature-themed picture books right out there in the park, and then take them on a nature walk. And as we go on the nature walk, we are going to talk about, paying attention to what their senses are experiencing, the sights, the smells, and the sounds. We're going to come back to another outdoor area and provide the kids each with a bare book, a blank book, and ask them to write a nature-themed book of their own, and it can be a story or it can be nonfiction. And I've been collecting nature-themed books from library sales and things, so we'll have a stack of those there for the kids and the parents if they want to go off on their own and read a little bit, use them as mentor texts for their own books. And then the book will be a kind of a souvenir of their day together at the park. And we're going to end with a picnic where they eat their snacks, and anybody who wants to share their books can share them. And this is for pretty young. This is for like 5 to 8 year olds with a parent. And we've never tried it before. We were only allowed to allow a limited number to sign up, and we've had 14 already sign up with their parents. So we're really excited to try this. And I imagine that if it's popular and it goes well, that we'll be repeating this. But we're really excited to try this program in some of the San Antonio natural areas. So
that sounds really exciting, and I bet you the kids will love that. It reminds me a little bit of the Science in the Park project that maybe Chris can talk about for a few minutes, which connected writing project in parks and families and some of the sites, right, Chris? That brought families into the park to do some science exploration and writing?
Yeah, so there's actually going to be a radio show on this topic also, so look for that in the NWP network. But we essentially are like invited, or had 3 different sites. It was the Pocono Writing Project in Delaware Water Gap, the Long Island Writing Project, and Sagamore Hill National Historic Site, which is Roosevelt's home, and then Roger Williams up in Roger Williams National Monument, and Stephanie West Puckett, who's affiliated with Rhode Island, but also the Tar Writing Project. Yeah, I'm starting to Is that right? Maybe that's right.
Star River, maybe.
Star River. Man, I'm so close. I thought I was getting the NWP lingo down. So these sites essentially did some piloting to imagine what it might look like for national parks and writing project sites to partner, and that partnering would be around bringing the parents and teachers of fourth and fifth graders to do science in parks and kind of build their skills in STEM education. And they learned a lot over that site or over the course of the year of this pilot project, and especially and imagined many different ways that writing and science meet and science literacy meets. So definitely look for that radio show. And I think some of the folks that participated in that are going to be participating in Write Out throughout the week too. So hopefully they'll share with us some of their work as we go along too.
And I think we have some of their resources off our Write Out resource page as well around using science as a lens for writing and exploration. So
yeah, and the Fenomena activity is up there too, and was one of the prompts that we used. Came out of some of the NWP intersections work, I think, but really helped to kind of ground us in noticing scientific phenomena around us, and then how can we write about that in order to deepen our noticing and understanding of our particular place is pretty powerful and really simple. You know, science and writing doesn't have to be super hard in order to find an entry point in, which I think is kind of a fun element to our partnership too and what we do together.
Great. Well, we're almost nearing the end here. First of all, I want to thank Kathryn for joining us and for writing the book that celebrates our national parks and also our park ranger friends too. And also thanks to everyone who kind of joined us tonight. I know some people I invited because they're doing such amazing work that I want to make sure that they could have a few minutes to talk about it and we could celebrate the work that you're doing. Write Out continues to this week and then into next week, and on Sunday is the National Day on Writing. So we invite everyone to find a place to go writing. We're having a writing marathon at our Springfield Armory Museum with teachers and other people. That'll be fun. And I know a lot of different people are doing different things. So we're hoping to see a lot of that in our different kind of social media sites if people are willing to share. On this coming weekend, we'll have our second Write Out newsletter will come out, kind of celebrating some of the things that are happening this week, but also moving into the second week of events. Again, Sunday is the National Day on Writing. And we have a Twitter chat coming up on Thursday at 7 o'clock Eastern, where we're hoping that people will join us in another form of conversation about stories and place and thinking about the idea of how we make those connections. And so we invite you to join us, and we'll be using the hashtag of Write Out as part of that. And we do have, I want to remind people that if you're looking for places to share the things that you're writing and making, we're on Flipgrid where you can make short videos explaining what you've been up to. We have a Facebook page that Rich set up that people are joining into to share there. We have a Twitter account, and we've kind of taken over the Write Out hashtag at this point. We have a Tumblr, we have a Padlet. You're welcome to do it on Instagram and Flickr, and wherever you feel comfortable sharing. There's no one kind of main spot. We're kind of pulling a lot of things together, and people are doing what they do, and we're trying to pay attention and celebrate it all. So thank you for doing all that. And I think we're pretty close to the end of time here. And I hope that we kind of see you in the different places as we kind of move forward in the next couple of days into the next week. And one reminder, I guess, is that although we're talking a lot about parks and national parks, that Write Out is as simple as going out and to sitting under the tree in your kind of schoolyard and having kids kind of write out there, or you write out there if you want. That although we have a National Parks Connection, we're celebrating all sorts of public spaces. So with that, thank you and good night, everyone.